Hi, welcome. I'm Dr. Aaron Rosselle. We're at ICOR, and we're in our series of health talks. Today, our focus is spring into action, and we're talking about the importance of a healthy lifestyle. Three main factors with having an active lifestyle are tissue motion, training, and weight bearing. And I'm going to get right to the point with this, so we get a quick talk and we get a lot of information packed into a little bit of time, and we'll be able to take questions live on on
Instagram Live.
Instagram Live at ICOR Health. So fire away with your questions as we go through. So the first aspect of being active in life is, and spring is a good time to do that, to get out. Our weather's changing. It looks like we're having winter here in the Bay Area for the first time this year. So it's a little bit colder than it typically is, but we get these warm weather comes in, and our bodies naturally want to move more. So it's a good time to get moving right now. And the three main benefits again are tissue motion, training, and weight bearing. And the first one, tissue motion, has to do with the movement that happens as we stand up and engage our bodies. So just the act of standing starts to get motion through our tissues because we get a release of background muscle contraction, which creates a pumping action. It's kind of like a sponge. If you want to get the water out of a full sponge, you squeeze the sponge. So we get that same sort of pumping action going in our tissues, and it's that motion that does the healing. That's the primary thing that heals in our body. There's a lot of areas in our tissues where we can't get circulation, and we're dependent on movement through those tissues. And a classic example of that are the joints in our bodies. They're relatively avascular, so they don't have a really good blood supply, and they need motion to create a pumping action, which is called imbibition. So the extension of a joint draws fluid or pushes fluid out as it compresses, or draws fluid in if it's expanding the joint. The contraction of the joint pushes fluid out or pulls fluid in, which brings in nutrients and takes out waste products. So there's a lot of healing that happens with just a simple act of standing. Now, standing is one thing, but we're talking about getting more active, and the thing that we as humans get the most benefit from is the act of walking. So we want to start with that and expand from there. And the reason that walking is so beneficial is that we get that pumping action going through the tissues, and we also put our body in the context of what it's built for, which means that with walking, let me see if we can get this on the camera here. With walking, with this counter position of the upper body to the lower body, and they twist opposite of one another. And when we get that, we take that pumping action that happens in the individual tissues and expand it throughout the whole body. So that's the tissue motion and the benefit of that piece. The next piece is training. When we stand up, 90% of our brain's activity is spent in maintaining ourselves in context of gravity. So it's balance and posture. Our brains are built for balance and posture. So we're actually, when we're moving, we're doing something that our bodies are built for. The importance of that is that if we continue moving, and I want everybody out there to be a strategic lazy person. So do the thing that gets you the most benefit. And don't worry about getting involved in a routine. If you fall off, just start again tomorrow. And that goes for something as simple as walking. And when you can get that going, when you can get that activity going and get it going on a routine basis, you're gonna start training your body for that activity. It's a kind of use it or lose it situation. When you're doing that, especially in the central nervous system, you're getting a competition going on between motion input and pain input. So the act of moving will actually decrease pain as you increase motion, because pain and movement in the central nervous system compete against one another. So if you're increasing that motion, you're decreasing the pain, and that's actually the body's ability to perceive pain. So it at a certain point in the tissues, the pain fibers get pulled out of the tissues as motion fibers get inserted in. So the only way to do that is the use it or lose it principle, and actually doing the activity. So training your body, the training aspect is super important. Just in terms of the pain that we'll feel in our bodies. And then there's also the piece of training that is indirect, where the firing through the nervous system of that motion that we get from walking is very stimulating to the limbic system, or the emotional center of the brain. So you get all this traffic up through, or nerve signal up through the emotional system, so you're reinforcing your emotional health. There's also the training effect on your metabolism. You increase your activity level, you increase you turn the body's metabolic priority toward repair of those tissues that are getting used, and away from insulin cycles primarily, where the body's priority is to store fuel for later. So that's the increase of adipose tissue, and the actual breakdown of other body tissues, because the priority is away from that repair. The last piece is weight bearing, and weight bearing has to do again with just where we started, just standing up and putting ourselves in the context of gravity. When we do that, we take advantage of a couple of laws, physical laws. One's Wolff's law and one is Davis's law, and those are both related to the kind of electrical charge that gets activated through a tissue when we're standing up and weight bearing. So our bodies are these transducers. We convert force into electricity, and that electricity stimulates the healing process. So when we stand up, and this is where you go from walking to something with more exertion, you increase that charge even further. So walking is great, about 7 times your body weight through each foot as you walk, and then if you're running, you pick that number to about 13 times. So you get that much more charge to the bones and to the softer tissues for healing and repair. So it's a nice progressive little thing that a little bit feeds more of that healing process in the body. So hopefully that gives you some reason to do some activity, get out there this spring, and influence your overall health by just getting out and moving. Do we have any questions here?
I have a question.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. We have a great understanding now of the importance of motion. And I understand that you deal with people who have various injuries. Are there any injuries that you could think of where maybe motion isn't a good idea?
If there's instability in the tissue, and we do this all by evaluation of each individual case, if there's instability in the tissue and it looks like that movement is going to cause more damage than good, then we want to restrict motion. But I can tell you, in 99% of the cases, we want to get people moving. Right,
and that's what the clarification that I wanted to understand was that it's only a very minuscule amount of injuries that actually prevent you from undertaking any kind of movement. And so
absolutely.
If you were going to gamble, the safe bet is that movement is almost always going to benefit you.
Yep, it's that whole shake it off principle, or get back on the horse. There's all these little adages about getting up and getting moving again, and that's the way the body works. That's the way the body heals. Yeah. Matter of fact, there have been good instances. One example is heart attack patients. After people have heart attacks, the standard wisdom was to put them on bed rest for 2 weeks, and they found out that the death rate was 70% higher than if they got people moving right after heart attack. And that just goes or heart surgery, I should say. It was bypass surgery patients. So they did the heart surgery, got people moving. They had 70% lower death rate in those people over the next 2 weeks in their healing process if they got them moving right away. And that goes for any other kind of bodily injury too. You got to get it moving, and a lot of it is a workaround. So how can we get the body moving around those injuries? Say if it's a lower body injury, maybe we're going to activate the upper body and get some weight bearing through the upper body to get it to get it moving, to bring the other side, the other end along when we can, kind of situation. Thanks, that's a great question.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and I hope that question is really informative to people too, because that's, again, the standard wisdom is, you know, to isolate it, and it's the whole RICE thing: rest, ice, compress, elevate, right? There's, in my practice, there's not ice prescribed, right? And rest, all the rest of them are minimized. We hardly use that strategy because we get better outcomes faster and more complete healing if we can get things moving right away. I think we're done.
All right.
Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you very much.
We'll see you again soon.